He looked away from the churning water beyond the fencing he leaned on, and to his left on the ground. A little ways away, he saw the dark furry form of a cat in a wary posture. He spotted its tail flicking irritably from side to side behind it, and recognized the animal immediately as Farah, just as he began to smile at the sight of her, not at all bothered by the fact she was kind of growling at him hostile. He paused when he saw an unfamiliar accessory around her neck. It was a dark gray ribbon, the bow tied at the back of her neck, facing the sky, and the tails of the ribbon were draped over either side of her back and were waving rapidly in the wind. He didn't know what to think. On one hand, he was happy that she was there despite what could be considered a collar of ownership being tied around her neck to ward off signs of being astray. But on the other, he immediately shoved off the feelings of overprotectiveness and knew a cat was just a cat. "Well, look at you, looking all fancy. You come from some kind of party or something?" he joked aloud, hands on his knees like he was regarding a child. She did not move, and continued to leer up at him. Her ear swiveled back against her head when he let out a sigh. "That's so cold of you, Farah. You've known me for quite a while now." He slowly crouched to the floor and reached into his pocket. He revealed an unopened can of cat food and thrummed his fingers on the lid rhythmically. Her ears perked at this, but as they expected, she made no move to approach. "Come on. I know you want it. I know you make a show of not being hungry, but we both know otherwise. Here." He popped open the lid and pulled off the top, revealing the shredded, soupy innards of the cat food. It was chicken-flavored, her favorite. However, she kept glued to her place, even when he placed the can arm lengths away from him and then closer to her. He stayed there a moment, realizing she wasn't budging and he was probably wasting his time retaming an incredibly feral cat. He pulled his phone out and checked the time. 12:20. He sighed to himself, dreading the return home considerably, and he looked across at Farah. She had settled onto the ground at that point, her paws crossed over one another in front of her, regally, and her eyes seeming to lose the intensity she had before. He felt she was patiently waiting for it until he had to leave so she could eat the cat food then, and thought to himself for a moment. After that moment of consideration had passed, he sat down onto his bottom with a loud grunt, startling her to look at him, and slumped against the painted bars behind him. "Hope you don't mind some company, Farah. I'm not itching to go back home anytime soon." He smiled cattily at her, and he nearly snorted at what seemed like displeasure in her expression. She remained where she was on the ground, and simply went back to looking sleepy and uninterested in his presence. It was certainly going to be a long night. To be honest," he began silently, Farah's ear twitching towards him, but not looking at him in any way. "I really enjoy your company, Farah. You're the only one I can really talk to." His voice dropped to a softer and more gentler tone, eyes turning upwards to the dark overcast turning sky. "My brother left with no word. My parents dumped all responsibility on me, and my relationship with my little sister is not what it used to be." He didn't notice how she quickly looked at him, eyes widening in bright amber. He continued speaking about his troubles with her, holding nothing back, and actually got close to crying in front of her. He had paused at this point when it got too much for him, and he put a hand over his eyes to hide them from anyone who would notice in passing, though he suspected a lonely guy sitting on the ground against the gate would be more of an indication. As he was sniffling to himself, his ear twitched at the sound of sudden scraping. Curious, he looked up and found, to his amusement, Farah sniffing at the can, nudging it with her long nose and shifting it forward every few inches. "Farah, the food is inside the can, not outside of it," he chuckled aloud, and of course she didn't acknowledge his words. He was feeling a bit better watching her keep hitting the can, and just questioned what on earth her thought process was, until he realized with a start that, with each nudge of the can, she was edging closer and closer to him. And the only thing he felt as a suggestion she knew exactly what she was doing moving towards him was when the couple of times the can had indeed popped off the invisible line of direction she was going, occurred, and she reoriented her body to be aligned to his general direction, and continued nudging the can again. He was silent all the while. She made her way towards him, not wanting to risk making noise if she actually didn't realize her actions would scare her off for good. So she eased closer and closer, soon a distance becoming a few feet away, and that becoming right within arm's length, until the can soon bumped straight into his thigh and made her pause in her tracks. She looked up and met bright, beautiful brown amber eyes at him, and he couldn't help but gawk at the sheer adorableness of just her. He knew she was smaller than average cats, but damn! He stiffened when her entire body just froze, and her hair began to raise, and he just about knew he was in for a vicious scratch. But miraculously, he saw her visibly calm down and acted like she wasn't even right in front of him, out of nowhere. He could only describe it as just her powering off to mellow mode. And then she began to eat. It took everything in him to keep from freaking out and accidentally scaring her off, or to even bat away the temptation to just put his hands on her silky-looking curly black fur. But oh God, was she making this difficult? He almost didn't want to speak, and he just continued to watch her as she began to eat. And over time, he just let go of his tenseness and just decided to relax and enjoy the closeness Farrah decided to give him. So far, that was a rarity on multiple occasions. He soon zoned out, listening a bit more to the water behind him, and basked in the way the wind brushed through his tresses, as Farrah, lapping her food, persisted calmly next to him. He would have dozed off had a car horn not blared obnoxiously from one side of the bridge before it drove by and further into the city. He quickly looked next to him, but relaxed when Farrah was not at all bothered by the sudden noise. He believed she might have been desensitized to any and all sudden noises that belonged to the outside world. It was certainly brave, but if she wasn't careful, she would probably get hurt that way. With a warm smile, he shuffled a little ways away from Farrah, who reacted in the usual feral and sketched-out way that she usually did with him, and he got up. As he prepared to leave, he spoke a soft farewell to her and turned to continue on home. He didn't notice the way Farrah watched him go with perked rounded ears, for she herself turned towards the darkened corner by the end of the bridge, where nothing but a cement wall was, and seemed to walk effortlessly through as though another side even existed.